to show you how I make my beach tumblers. So I already prepped my cup and did my spray paint and got this tumbler ready. So I am now mixing up my epoxy, and I'm going to put a thin layer on here, and then I'm going to show you all of the glitters I'm going to use and how I apply them to get this nice beachy ombre. So I am using CCDIY's Fast Set, and you can see it's pretty yellow, and that is because I've had my part B in a container that was getting oxygen in it. So my part B is oxidized, and I wouldn't want to use this right out of my regular container. I wouldn't use it on anything that was going to be, you know, a really light or white base, but for this it's dark enough that it shouldn't make any difference. So I'm going to go ahead and use it. I'll go ahead and I use what I still have in that little container on any tumblers that are going to be dark. But if I have something light, I use it out of the, I use my epoxy that I've had in the closet and that has not been opened or really exposed to much air, so it's still clear like it should be. Anyway, so I have my epoxy mixed up. I'm not worried about bubbles because this is going underneath and this is just for my glitter. So I have my epoxy ready, and I have a ton of colors that I'm going to put on this, and I will show you each one as I'm going through it. So first thing, I'm going to get these out of the way because I don't want any epoxy getting on it. I'm going to use that for, might as well just use that one. I already got epoxy on it. Okay, so I'm just going to take my tumbler and pour it on the bottom. I'm going to use probably not even half of this because I want it to be thin. And I'm just going to coat the entire tumbler. I don't want it to run. I just want it to be tacky so that my glitter will stick to it and not get, if you've put glitter on, if you've done this epoxy method with your glitter and you see that you get spots in the glitter where it looks like it looks real dark, then chances are you have too much epoxy on it, and it's actually sinking under the epoxy. So if you get uneven spots like that, that's a good chance that's a sign that you are using too much. Okay, so now I'm gonna set it in my little holder, and you can see how much I still have left. I have a lot left. So I'm gonna put this in a mold, and I'm not gonna let it go to waste. So what I do when I start this is I start normally on the bottom with my chunky glitters. And especially with the chunky, I like to pour some out and use my fingers and really just apply it that way. So I'm going to hold it at an angle, and this is kind of a mix. This isn't just chunky, but I normally start with my chunkies and then let my finer glitters fill in. So that looks pretty good on the bottom, almost. I need to get right around the edge a little bit better. But I have another chunky I'm going to use on this one, so I'm not too concerned about it. And then while I'm waiting, I'm going to put my tumbler back in my little holder. I printed these on my 3D printer, and they work perfect, so I use them a lot. So I'm going to put that back in the bottle. So that was Glitter Chimp's Bridesmaid. And now I'm gonna get the Beach Please and put a little bit of that here. This is just, it has some iridescent just going in ever so lightly with this. And I may put a few on the bottom if it sticks, which I'm not too worried about right now, because this is usually, when I do tumblers like this, it's normally a 2 glitter process for me. And now I'm gonna switch over to my blues. And I'm gonna use a different one because I don't want my blue getting mixed in. And I'm going to use this Athena, I think it's Athena. Yeah, Athena, the glitter guy. And this is gonna go along the top edge. So this kind of gives you the look of like a cut glass. So now I'm gonna go right along the top edge. Oops. And the reason I use my fingers is I feel like I have more control of the glitter, especially this chunky, because I don't want big, I want it to be subtle. I don't want big chunks. So now I'm gonna turn my tumbler just a little bit to the side so it can kind of fall. I want to keep it close to the edge, but you know, that's the trick about the ombres, is you need to let it move down the cup. And there's a ton of videos on how to do ombres, how to do this beach tumbler, and I guess do whatever works for you. But this is how I do it, because this is how I get the results I want. All right, so we now have the bottom. Got a little too much here, but I should be able to cover that up. And right there along the edge, I'm gonna put my tumbler back on this little holder and transfer my glitter back. Now this is another chunky called Whirlpool. So I'm going to give a little bit of this. And this time I'm just going to go down, just lightly go down my cup. But I want to keep just a little bit at a time, because I don't want to cover up that white, because you have to be careful with these chunkies and with these darker colors. So I will come back to that, but just to get a little bit of a base down. All right, now I will go to my white. I'm gonna get another one so I don't cross-contaminate this. Now I'm using Pearl glitter Chimp. And I'm just gonna lightly put it right here and put my cup at a little bit of an angle, because I want it to go into the blue a little. Again, if you find that, you know, you'll probably end up with a little bit of a stripe here, and that is fine, because then you can go back. I normally, like I said to start with, I normally do this in I do my glitter on these cups in a process that takes 2 times. All right, okay, so I got my white, and now I'm gonna fill in with my tan. Where is it? Tanned hide. And I'm gonna do the same that I did with the white. Just let this fill in. And I'm kind of aiming it right for the edge, and then it will fall down the cup. And don't worry at this point if you find that your glitters look kind of striped, like the ombre is not real ombre, because you're gonna go back, or at least I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna fix this on the next one. Okay, and then I'm going to go in with a little bit of this Nautica It's a chunky mix, but it's not real chunky. So I'm just gonna give a little bit. All right, so now I'm going to continue to blend it in. Rule of thumb, I usually do the lighter colors unless I'm working on the edges. I usually do my lighter colors first because those are, you know, I want that to take up the majority of the epoxy. And then add the darker after. I get a better blend if you start from, normally if you start from light to dark, with the exception of doing, you know, the bottom or the rim. That's how I normally start. Okay, so now I'm going to go in with my blue bonnet and I'm going to fill in any of that excess that didn't get covered by all of the chunky. Okay, so now I have this done and I'm gonna let it set, come back in a few hours whenever it's dry, and I'm gonna add one more layer, and then I will touch up any of the lines that are not real faded. If they look too striped, I will come and touch that up, and then if I need to add any more like bits of chunky, so definitely I need to add some chunky here, and I might be all right at the top, but that's not too bad for an ombre to start with. So I'm gonna let it set, and then I will be back with the last layer. So I got my ombre done, or at least the initial part of my ombre done. It's on my turner, and the thing is, the epoxy is so thin that I could probably just hang it and let it go, but I like to be safe and put it on the turner and let it go ahead and turn as it's drying. So I'm gonna show you again, because you may not have seen it very well to begin with, all the colors that I used to get this. So I started with the bottom, and I used Glitter Chimp Bridesmaid, so that was the first chunky I did, and then I added some Beach Please. So those were the two chunkies that I put on the bottom. And then to fill in, I used Glitter Chimp's Tan Hide. Sometimes I add some champagne to it to, you know, because it's just a little bit lighter to get a little more of the ombre, but I don't think I needed it in this one, so I left it out. I was able to blend enough the white and this tanned hide that I really didn't think it was necessary. Okay, so then the white that you saw me use, this was the Pearl from Glitter Chimp, and then continuing on up the cup, I did most of my light blue with the Glass Slipper, and I added a little bit of chunky, this Mixology chunky mix in where this light layer is in Nautica. And then around the edge, that kind of cut glitter look that I used, that was Athena, and this is from the Glitter Guy. So you can see all of that, you know, multifaceted cut for that glitter. And I filled in a little bit with Whirlpool. That was another Glitter Chimp. And then the very end that I filled in all of that darker, I used Blue Bonnets. And this is a holographic ultrafine that you can do tack-it method with this on other cups, but I like this. I like the way this Blue Bonnets looks for the top of my beach tumblers. So this is what it looks like after the first layer, and once this dries, I'm going to come back and put another thin layer of epoxy and touch up any of the ombre that I need to touch up. If it needs to be blended a little bit more, I'm going to blend it out then, and I will add some extra definition with usually the Beach Please. and we'll see how it goes. All right, so at the beginning of this video, I started off with my Fast Set epoxy. You saw it was actually pretty yellow. This is the epoxy I'm going to use. It is the exact same thing, and it is probably just about as old as what you saw in the first part, but this has been in the closet and has not been in one of those FIFO like salad dressing bottles. So it did not, my part B did not get oxidized because it's been sealed up. So I'm going to go ahead and get this mixed up, and I'll be right back. And I'm going to stir. So you can see the difference. This has not discolored at all, and the epoxy is the same age. It's been sitting in the cabinet and the lid has been on, and it's been on fairly tight, so I've not gotten any discoloration. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I like to start from the bottom. And make sure and get that bottom real good. And then I'm just going to go up the tumbler. Now, I forgot to mention this part, but before I started putting my epoxy on after my cup was dry, I also used CCDIY's Quick Coat to coat my tumbler so that it sealed in all of my glitter. By sealing your glitter, it will reduce the chances that you're going to have glitter that migrates from one section to another. And the idea of this is just to coat that glitter and get it laid down real good. And I think it's pretty good. All right. So what I'm gonna do now, before I put this on the turner, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna add a little bit of some of my chunkies, but before I do that, I want to get a little bit darker right here where the bottom is. So I'm going to do it this way. I'm just going to do a little bit right here at the bottom. I don't want to do too much. Move this cup out of the way. I don't want to do too much. I just want to give a little bit more depth right at the edge. Okay, and that was a ultrafine glitter chimp. That was Beaver. So now I'm ready to take this and put it over on my turner. Okay, that's pretty good. All right, so now I'm gonna finish this up, and I wanna add a little bit of depth here, so I'm gonna use my Beach Please. And I'm just gonna put it in my hand. And I'm gonna let it fall. I want it to be overkill. All right, that's enough. I'll put the rest back in here. And then the last thing on the bottom of this will be the bridesmaid. And I'm going to add a little bit more of these just towards the bottom. Okay, I think my white is pretty good. So the only other thing I'm gonna do is maybe some darker right up at the top. Not too much. so this is the time if you get any glitter that's migrated somewhere it shouldn't be. Okay, nope, those were already in there. There's one. But now's the time you can get them out. Otherwise, they will be there. All right. That was the only one that wasn't there before. Okay. So then the last thing I'm going to do is use my glass slipper. And I'm going to blend this out just a little bit more. And again, I put my hand up kind of high. And then I'm going to do a little bit right here at the top too. All right, so I think we've got it pretty much blended, and I'm just going to let it set. And whenever it's done, I'm going to be ready to put my thicker coat of epoxy on and do the white caps right here at the right here along the bottom.
Okay, so now that is completely dry and I'm ready to put my next coat of epoxy. This one's going to be a little bit thicker, so I'm using my regular CCDIY, my regular epoxy. This is not the Fast Set. I want to have a little bit more, I want to have more working time, so I went ahead and mixed that up, and now I'm going to go ahead and apply it over the entire tumbler. And on this coat of epoxy, I don't need it really, really thick, but I want to apply it a bit thicker than what I would be using to apply my glitter, because I want all of my glitter covered, and I really want to try to avoid having any pieces sticking up. Whatever's sticking up and doesn't get covered, I'm going to have to go back and sand before I can put my decal on. And in this step, I'm also going to be putting the white caps in, so I want to have my epoxy a little bit thicker so that it can move. All right, so now that I've got my tumbler covered again with epoxy, I'm going to go ahead and mix up a little bit of white, and you could use alcohol ink, or for this, I didn't know where my alcohol ink was, so I just used a little bit of acrylic paint. Okay, so for this final step, I already have my tumbler coated and I have it on the turner and it's spinning, so I make sure that my epoxy is nice and even, and then I'm going to bring in this white that I just mixed up. You can use whatever you have to put this white on. I'm just using the stick that I started with, your popsicle stick or basically anything. I saw a video from Jessica Flynn and I think she was using a fork, if I can remember correctly. So whatever you have. This part, you don't want it to be super thick, so I'm kind of putting it in sparingly, and I want to keep this look kind of organic and flowy, so there's no rhyme or reason. I'm just putting it down and I'm going to let it spin. I also like the effect that I get from letting the epoxy kind of string out and again, letting it be fluid and organic looking and not so controlled. Again, this is water, so I want it to kind of mimic the water, and I just let it be however it's going to be. And also at this part, I normally don't use my heat gun. I don't want it to completely thin out and start to take on the look of a Milky Way. I want those darker areas to stay where they are, and I want it to kind of move on its own. But if you feel you need to, then again, you do whatever you need to do to make your cup look the way you want it to look.
Well, I have my cup finished. I got my decal put on, and it is ready to get hopefully the final coat. And I'm going to share one more little tip with you. So I put my decal on, and if you have had any problems with your vinyl lifting once you put what you think is going to be your last coat of epoxy, I'm going to share with you something that I recently started doing. I don't know why I didn't think of this earlier. So anyway, I put my decal on, and then I grabbed my UV resin and I put a little bit of this, put a little bit of my UV resin over top of my vinyl, and just enough to seal the edges. And you really can't tell. Yeah, I guess you can see it's a little shiny. So I put just a little dab of this, enough that it will, like I said, seal those edges and prevent it from lifting once I get my epoxy on, especially when the epoxy starts kind of heating up. I've had some more, it would do this if I'm working with like thin pieces or something like that with the vinyl, but I started just sealing it with this UV resin. So that's taken care of that problem, and I haven't had any issue with it since then. So just another tip. And after my final coat of epoxy, this is how it turned out.